Good afternoon. Today we're here to talk about the conclusion of a case, People versus Jason Ricketts. This is a case that highlights the ways in which law enforcement works to stop sex offenders who scope out and prey upon vulnerable children. They then trap them into a vicious cycle of abuse, manipulation, and isolation, using threats to expose them on social media and elsewhere. The 23-year-old defendant, Jason Ricketts of New Rochelle, was sentenced today to 21 years in state prison with 20 years of post-release supervision and sex offender registration. This follows his guilty plea to 4 felonies, which took place on January 29th. He pled to 2 counts of coercive sexual conduct against a child in the first degree, criminal sexual act in the second degree, and promoting an obscene sexual performance by a child. Today, we have secured justice for the victims who courageously came forward to recount to us and to the court the unspeakable horrors over many years, and they agreed to work with our office to help make this prosecution successful. So let me talk about how the defendant gained the trust of his victims and committed this crime. Like many sexual predators, Jason Ricketts scoped out these kids. One was as young as 8 years old when they met. He met the kids in person at locations where children gather, and he befriended them. He befriended them by deceiving them and their parents into believing that he was younger than he was. Then he brought these children into his home after he gained the trust of these victims, even using illicit substances to make them feel more comfortable, and then he abused them, physically and psychologically. This is classic child predator conduct: groom, manipulate, and abuse. He repeatedly engaged in sexual conduct with them, and worse, he filmed the encounters, sometimes secretly, collecting material to later use to coerce and control them. The sexual abuse began in 2019 when the victims were just 12 years old, and it continued for years until 2023. When the victims tried to leave or stop hanging out with him, Jason Ricketts would not let that happen. He would threaten to post videos and images that he had of them on Snapchat and Instagram and expose them to their peers. This is something known as sextortion. This is what sexual predators do. They prey upon, they trap, they control, they manipulate their victims. Fortunately, Dropbox Inc., a cloud-based file hosting service, filed a cyber tip line report with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. This is something that happens every day. They file a report about an uploaded video containing minors engaged in sexual acts. This was not one of the files videos of our victims. It was separate, but it led us to the defendant. The NCMEC alert went out to New York State Police, who developed a suspect in Westchester County. We then obtained a search warrant in January 2023 for a location in New Rochelle, the defendant's residence. With assistance from the New Rochelle Police Department, our investigators seized multiple devices from the defendant's home. Subsequent forensic analysis of his phone, conducted by investigators from our high-tech unit, revealed a photo vault disguised as a calculator app containing dozens of videos and photos of the defendant performing sexual acts on children. This is how we were able to discover the 3 child victims in Westchester. And while this fact pattern is alarming and is frankly the kind of thing that keeps us parents up at night with worry, it also highlights why so many predators do get caught, because we do incredible investigative teamwork with law enforcement, with prosecutors, law enforcement at the state, local, and federal level. And we have partners like NCMEC, which is the only nationwide clearinghouse for the reporting of activities related to child victimization, and they're an incredible organization. According to NCMEC, the center's cyber tip line receives reports every day, every single day, of suspected child sexual exploitation from the public and from online electronic service providers. In 2023 alone, excuse me, they received more than 36 million reports, which were made available to law enforcement, as happened in this case where the New York State Police then contacted us. So this is what law enforcement is working with and fighting every single day. Our investigators located the 3 victims and their families who so bravely agreed to work with us. And I just want to stress here how important it is that the victims in any case and here should never, ever have to feel shame about coming forward. This is something that happened to them. They were abused. And the earlier that victims feel they can come forward to a trusted adult or friend, the better. The young victims are never, ever to blame in these circumstances. After we arrested the defendant on February 2nd, we seized an additional device which revealed internet searches on how to remotely wipe devices, whether a person's age can be determined through a video, and searches for attorneys who specialize in representing defendants accused of sex crimes. This defendant knew he was in trouble, and he was right. The defendant has remained in custody at the Westchester County Jail since his arrest. He was indicted in July 2023. He pled guilty in January 2024. And today, he was sentenced and brought to justice. These kinds of cases take incredible teamwork. Our successful prosecution was the result of the coordination and collaboration between all the law enforcement agency partners from local, state, and federal levels to the 4 corners of the DA's office. I want to thank the New Rochelle Police Department for their incredible and valuable assistance that they provided during our investigation. Today we have Captain Coyne here with us, Commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, and Detective Lieutenant Brian Fagan, Executive Officer of the Criminal Investigations Division. The case was also worked on by Sergeant Timothy Adrian, Sergeant Terrence Fudge, and Commissioner Robert Gazzola, of course. NCMEC could not be represented here, but I really want to acknowledge and thank their dedicated team who, again, work every day on their cyber tip line reports and provide us with these incredibly valuable leads that lead to hands-on predators. The Westchester County District Attorney's Office Cyber Crimes Bureau and High Tech Crimes Unit is proud to be part of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Program, or ICAC. That's a statewide coalition of law enforcement, investigators, analysts, and prosecutors from the New York State Police to the New York State Attorney General's Office, the Department of Criminal Justice Services, and many, many other law enforcement agencies. With us today is Senior Investigator Timothy Malone from the New York State Police, Troop K Computers Crimes Unit, part of the ICAC task force that I just described. And of course, I want to thank New York State Police for the incredible heavy lifting they did in identifying this defendant, his location, which allowed us to put an end to this incredibly horrible conduct. Without NCMEC and the New York State Police, we never would have known about Jason Ricketts. I also want to thank the Westchester Institute for Human Development's Children Advocacy Center, the CAC, for their assistance and cooperation. And last, but certainly not least, I'm proud of the dedicated team of prosecutors, investigators, crime analysts, victim aides, and trauma therapists from within my office who worked day in and day out to help make the victims feel comfortable with talking about something so incredibly uncomfortable. I had the opportunity to meet with the victims today after the sentencing, and they are incredibly resilient people, and I believe that they're going to have good lives, and I really truly believe it is the work that has been done over this more than year period by everyone here, and especially the people in my office who are trained to work in trauma and with these kinds of victims. We have from our Trials and Investigation Division, our Cyber Crimes Bureau Chief, Laura Forbes. We have our Special Prosecution Division, well represented here. Our Domestic Violence Bureau Chief, Deputy Chief, Janelle Armentano. Our Sex Crimes Bureau ADA, Molly O'Rourke is not here, but she worked on this case as well. Our Senior DV Aide and Investigations Information Coordinator, Melissa Sheely. Our Clinical Trauma Therapist, the incredible Stacy Nolan-Meany is here. Our Child Abuse and Elder Abuse Bureau Chief, Christine Hatfield, is here. And our chiefs of the division, Fred Green and Michelle Lopez, are standing behind or in front of me. And all of this would not happen without their leadership. We also have from the Special Prosecutions and High Tech Crimes units of our Criminal Investigations Division, so our investigators as they're known. Today we have criminal investigator Maricia Baltimore and Lethea Smith are both here. Criminal analyst Chloe McSweeney is here. And investigator Thomas Woodburn could not be here today, but he worked on this case. And retired investigator Luis Martinez was invaluable as well. This is really, and as well, a few more investigators to name. We have investigator James Osipov, who's here, and Deputy Chief Andy Gracia is here, and of course Chief Dan McKenna. Peter Martin also worked on this. Anthony Simella, I believe, is here also, and Dan Higgins, I think I said. So we're well represented here because this really was such an incredible coordination amongst different divisions in our office, which is not always necessary, but when it is, it's an incredible thing to see happen. Most of us, I think, are wearing blue today, and that's in recognition of April being Child Abuse Awareness Prevention Month. So it's very appropriate that this sentencing took place today because this really is about the abuse of children. 12-year-olds are children, and the sexual abuse inflicted upon them is child abuse. And part of our job is not only to arrest, prosecute, and take dangerous individuals like this off the street, it's to raise awareness. And that's where, frankly, the media and social media, and we need adults to talk about this. This happens. We're never going to get rid of all the child predators that are out there. There are too many. What we can do, though, is we can raise awareness that this happens. We can talk about how young people are susceptible to grooming and manipulation. We can encourage them to not feel shame, to take the stigma out of talking about it as early as possible. There's too much stigma about it in our society. The more we do that, the more we will be able to save and prevent young people from having their lives ruined from this kind of conduct. I'm really proud of the work in this case. I'm proud of the education and outreach that we've been doing. Chief Laura Forbes, as I mentioned, she's done incredible work bringing cyber safety, internet type programs to schools across this county. We hosted one online. We go into schools, our ADAs take their own personal time and do this day in and day out. And again, it's so important. And, I think it's worth the media paying as much attention to something like this as some of the other scandals that are out there with, perhaps more high-profile people. This is the kind of thing, no matter who it is, who the name is of the perpetrator, it's incredibly damaging to the victims. So I thank you for being here and for people paying attention to it and listening, and we can take on-topic questions.
Do you think that there might be other victims?
I should have mentioned that we obviously have a tip line, a hotline, 914-995-TIPS that anyone should feel free to reach out to. we always worry that there are more victims, and obviously if people now feel comfortable coming forward, we are absolutely here for them, even if it's not necessarily for purposes of additional prosecution, though that's always a possibility, but just to get the services and the help.
Well, I guess my question really is in the calculator app, were there images of other children?
Do you feel comfortable with it?
Who either couldn't be identified
Or you're still
didn't
looking
wanna
to
come forward.
identify?
Yeah, I mean, I think for purposes now, he certainly was indicted regarding other images than just these three victims. But these are the three victims who the charges pertain to.
So anyone that wants to come forward should go to that line.
Absolutely.
But were those images, his involvement with people, or just pornographic images that he had on in that app?
I mean, yeah, both.
Were you able to target any other abusers? Because I'm assuming if he had been sent any photographs that there was someone else involved. I'm wondering if that's led to anything.
So that's a great question. I mean, that happens often where you have one perpetrator and that leads you to others. I do not believe that in this case that happened, but it is something that happens quite often in investigations.
How specific was the Dropbox tip, and how did it lead to Westchester County?
Anyone want to take that? Okay. Yeah, I think we want to stay away from revealing too much about these kind of investigations, but I think the important point is that service providers, online service providers like Dropbox Sync, they're the eyes and ears out there for law enforcement, and they do a really good job of it in terms of policing, if you will, what they can, and reporting tips to NCMEC and then to law enforcement.
So in 2019, 2 of the victims were 12 and 1 was 8.
No. The 8-year-old met before 2019, but the abuse happened in 2019 when they were all 12.
Okay.
But had met before that,
Okay.
yeah.